Welcome back, everyone. This is going to be a bit shorter than most of my other videos. I'm in a bit of a time crunch, actually. I need this Zenith needs to be done before about the middle of August, so I'm running out of days to do it. I've been too busy working on the cabinet, actually, and that's almost done. It ain't perfect. Using spray cans is very difficult on a very large piece of furniture, and the results are so-so. Certainly not as good as what I've done on my tabletops before, but it's going to be in use for the general public, and probably get knocked around a little bit, so I won't feel as bad because it's not Fred Taylor level of quality. That being said, this is a Zenith 6S362, so one of the stars and bars variety with the rectangular faceplate that was basically Zenith reusing cabinets from their previous line. So this started life as a 6S262 cabinet that they started using. I can't think, either that or a 6S254 cabinet with the teardrop shape escutcheon. And they came up with a push-button tuning solution that was simply retrofitted. This whole apparatus up here was simply bolted on to existing chassis, and then a new escutcheon was designed to make that whole thing fit. So you've got this baloney floating up in here, and it really is, it's just sort of an erector set that attaches with some sheet metal screws, and then the cabinets have a fresh stamp on the back. And in fact, you can see that, well, later on I'll take a look at the cabinet here, and the hole for the actual dial, you can see where they just took a saw and made it more square in shape from the original to accommodate this. But that being said, the reason why I have this radio, our club is putting on its annual swap meet in August, and the club president picked up this Zenith. I thought she was going to be sold to the club at auction or something. They considered that. But she wanted it to be a functional display at the actual meet, so that we can try and get more non-radio people interested in the club, and having a set there functional that you can actually tune and mess with the controls and everything. I mean, most folks aren't going to bring one of their private collectibles to a show and let people mess with it, really. But, this is going to be a display item. You bring it out, fire it up, and then, let people have fun. So, again, we're not worried too much about the cabinet in that respect, as it'll probably get dinged a little bit. But the main thing is it needs to work. It needs to function, and this looked on the outside when it was originally picked up, and I didn't save a photo of what it looked like when we got it. The finish had been completely stripped off the exterior, and a single coat of polyurethane had been applied over the whole thing. And this cabinet originally had, decent amount of toner on it, and then some flat black trim in areas. Remnants of the flat black trim were left behind, and it just looked all kinds of ugly. And I couldn't stand it, so I stripped the whole damn thing down and started to redo it. Mine will not be perfect. It'll be decent enough, but it'll look a little more accurate. But the chassis had a brand new cord hanging out the back of it, and there was a tag or a sticker that I saw at the time that said it had been repaired at a radio shop. Now, unfortunately, I don't have that tag with it now. I'm not sure what happened to it. There was this sticker, although I think this might have been an auction lot number. But there was that there. The cord was replaced, and there was at least one GT tube, I think a 6H6 GT up here. I am trying to find a correct 6H6G. I'm probably going to have to go on eBay to get one because they're not very common. But I want to flip this over and we take a look at the chassis. There's not a lot that goes on inside these Zeniths, and I love these chassis because they are so monstrously deep for the low level of complexity that this has. And wow, there's not a lot of light in there. Hang on a second, I can fix that. I was messing around with my lighting conditions earlier, trying to see if I could get the face of the radio lit up, but I was having problems with the light just being really obnoxious. Reflections in the dial glass. But this should work pretty adequately. Yeah. Not too bad. Let me try and get a little bit closer. This is just a repurposed desk lamp. Okay. Get you further inside here. I gotta get these. I have brand new rubber feet. These are... Oh. Awesome. Completely compressed. I don't think there was more than one chassis bolt actually holding this inside. Maybe it was just the knobs. I don't remember. I don't think I have any hardware to hold this thing in the cabinet, so I'll have to get some. It's probably quarter 20 from the look of things. Machine head screw. Okay, so we got the massive flywheel here for the tuning. Now I did order a dial belt from this. It hasn't shown up yet. Having some issues tracking down why it's not here yet, because it was sent 16 days ago. I talked to the guy. He says he sent it out. Maybe there's an address problem. Who knows? Either way, hoping that gets here, because I really need that, because the dial belt on this one is dry rotted and cracking on basically every point, and it would be really nice to get that replaced, because if it breaks while we're at the show, we're SOL there. Replacing it is kind of an annoying operation, having to take this whole thing, the shaft, out. And there's a circlip at the front. And is there one at the back? Or is that just a bushing? That just looks like a bushing. So that might not be too difficult, but we do have to loosen the flywheel and get all that. And then of course we got to get up to the front. And we gotta... Do we have to take the dial glass off to get the belt over the shaft there? Ooh. Maybe. That is a distinct possibility. Okay, so what has been done previously? Well, I have my suspicions, so new cord, naturally. But in terms of new components... here we are. Should show up on the camera. Right there. We have one, count 'em, one brand new electrolytic out of two. Where's the second one, you might ask? Well, the originals are here, and the second new one is this big paper firecracker right here that was probably installed sometime in the 50s. Same as with all these sealed tight capacitors. There's still a few original Zenith ones in here. That guy, that guy, that guy, that guy. The rest of these, I highly doubt are factory original, and that's just because the solder work where they attach is a little more new and oftentimes a little more just kind of junky looking. It's not very clean installation work. Notice that a lot of shops seem to just like tacking things onto terminals rather than actually trying to get a good point of contact, or they solder it very quickly and it leaves a cold joint, like this area up here where they've just wound some of the leads around some of the other nearby capacitors. Not great. Either way though, there's not a lot to replace in here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11? 11, and then a 12th one on the tone switch at the top. Yeah, there's a tone switch in the just above where the push buttons are, and there's a single wax cap mounted to that. So that'll have to be replaced. What is that? Okay. But yeah, not too much to worry about. It looks like it may have had the power transformer replaced, and I would say it probably has. There's a lot of extra holes in this chassis, I imagine, for slightly more fancy versions, probably for the ones that have motorized tuning that isn't being utilized. It's also got 2 holes here and some more holes back there that don't seem to have any practical reason for being there. Interesting. It also appears to have had a volume control replacement. If I scoot the chassis over, we can see, because move the lamp out of the way. All of these shafts are supposed to have their D-shaft design for the knobs, and this guy right here started life as a splined shape on one side, and the end has been ground to a flat in order to accommodate a knob, which mercifully this thing did come with all of its knobs. It's a bit of a tight fit. I may have to work with that. I think this one down here is probably decent. Yeah, it's okay. Yeah, so the top tone control knob, all I have left is that. The base was broken off completely. This is the new reproduction from renovated radios. And for plastic, these are awesome. Really, in fact, I have a full set of push button and call letter, the little fingernails for these from them. So that would be this stuff. Oh yes, and they offer a nice range of brand new heavy-duty chassis washers, the big guys, because the recessed spots in the cabinet are pretty deep. So I went with the largest ones they had to give this enough height so that everything lines up once it's in the cabinet. But we have brand new dial or station fingers, and of course the brand new push buttons. Plastic on these is a little more translucent, but in terms of color originality, here is an original one. Here is the reproduction. It's not too bad. I think he actually offers some of these with a bit of aging given to them. Maybe I bought those. Either way, though, these are really, really well done. And he's the only guy that's doing these buttons. If you need Zenith or RCA stuff, knobs predominantly, Renovated Radios is the go-to. We'll see about putting a link to it in the description if YouTube doesn't smack me for having suspicious links again. Oh, yes, and of course, before I forget, the escutcheon for this, hence the term stars and bars. Got these two stars here. Mine are worn brass that might, and I don't know if that's people rubbing their fingers over them or not, but the bars are usually bright on the ones I've seen. I've seen some where they completely polished the whole thing, and it looks so gaudy. That may have been the way it came from the factory. That's a point of contention amongst a lot of folks as to whether or not you want to leave the antique look. I really like the way the aged brass looks on the Zeniths with these as highlights, so I'm going to leave it that way. Unfortunately, whoever redid the cabinet also decided that the original screws, he probably couldn't find oval head number 2 or number 4 wood screws, and so he went with number 6s and pretty well messed up every single one of the holes on this thing. In fact, when I did the grain fill stage on the cabinet, I wound up plugging those holes. I have to go back and re-drill them slightly in order to get new screws. That means I have to hop on McMaster Carr or Fastenal and find some proper oval head wood screws that are made out of brass. I've got a darkening solution so I can make them to match this if need be. And this needs some cleanup work too. Have to pound these back down because that punches right into the cabinet. Doesn't really do any good, and in fact the whole scutcheon is kind of warped in some locations. But that's not important right now. I'm just stalling because I need to just get in here and get this thing working. I don't know if I'll bother doing a power-up test. I would much rather just get everything swapped over. I'll pull up a schematic, though, because you never can tell for sure if someone just had a whole bunch of .05s and .01s and decided to just go bananas. That's a .06. Is that exactly the... Oh, hey, look. This capacitor right here isn't even attached anymore. Its lead broke off. Did someone do that on purpose? Maybe it was leaky and they just cut it? Who knows? So I'll have to do that. I didn't see a safety cap on this, now that I think about it. The power wiring is right here. Going up to that. Doesn't look like it. I'll check the schematic. There may have been one originally down here. But if there wasn't one from the factory, then I won't worry about it. And there's a heck of a lot of holes on either side. I have to wonder what all that was for. If that was for jigging it when the factory. One of these may actually be large enough to accommodate a fuse holder. I would like to put a fuse on this just in case, but I don't want to make them obvious. I've seen some folks drill holes in the back of the cabinet and put in the twist style fuse holders like you find on test equipment. I don't like that just because it's very obvious, and it kind of ruins the look of the cabinet or of the chassis. So if I put it underneath, yeah, you gotta pull the chassis to get to it, but if the fuse is blowing, you should be pulling the chassis anyway. That's my thought on it anyway. I think I also have some extra automotive style, the big ones that I used on the portables. That's an option too. But there's a lot of holes in here, and I can also get some of the single block style fuse holders and just bolt one right to one of any of these holes that are in there. That's just kind of handy. Okay. I will dig into this and get back to you once the bulk of it is dealt with, and we can see if it'll make some noise. Oh boy, where did we leave off? I think it was underneath the chassis and pointing out all the work that needed to be done. Suffice to say, all of that work underneath has been done. We'll go back and take a look at it. I am actually up here on the top of the chassis doing just some housekeeping. Chassis was pretty dirty, your normal stuff, lots of tobacco residue. You can always tell when you're cleaning off tobacco residue because you get this wonderful greenish brown sludge that just sort of comes off of everything. But the paint was pretty well coated in it. Not going to be able to get around the inside there because I'm not taking apart the tuners, the condenser assembly. I had belts ordered for this. I had them ordered, and the order disappeared in the mail, and I could not get hold of the supplier that I bought them from, and they're kind of the only shop around, so I'm not going to do anything, not going to talk about them disparagingly. Maybe he's just having trouble. Maybe the USPS screwed up royally and it went to Timbuktu, whatever. I didn't get them. I took another look at the belts that are in the radio. They're still surprisingly flexible. And they're still holding up just fine. And they've only really got to survive 1 day of operation. And if they've survived for 70, 80 plus years, they still seem to be doing just fine. They're partially leather, I think. When it does come time to replace them, what I'll probably do is go to the McMaster car. I'll cut the original belt out. I will measure it roughly, and then find a Buna N O-ring that is the same ID as the belt's ID, and just go with that, because the newly made ones appear to be just custom-made O-rings with ultrasonically welded ends. And yeah, about the same thing, and I can specify the size. Of course, you're kind of limited to the sizes that are on hand at McMaster car in that case. That being said, got most of the junk off the top here. Looks pretty good. Most folks aren't going to be staring into the back of this, but I do like having a clean place to work. And I hooked up my air compressor, got most of the dust blown out of all the major areas, took care around all the hair-thin wiring up here on the automatic tuning coils, and I've actually been spending quite a bit of time up here just trying to get most of these contacts clean. And I gotta say, I'm sure the engineers at Zenith were really, really good at their jobs. This is really cheap. I mean, this is... I'm going to have to go through my other sets that have automatic push-button tuning. I don't have a lot of those, actually. Most of them are motorized. But this... I get that this is just a quick add-on that they tacked on some chassis to make a new model line to get rid of some older stock, I suppose. But this is probably the cheesiest way you could do a push-button contact. I'm not sure how close you guys are. Let me Alright, so the automatic tuning assembly, we've got our 6 coils here with the adjustable screws in the front for moving the slug around and changing the preset. Uh, each one of these would have a specific frequency range that it is capable of. I don't know what the range is, like a few hundred kilocycles or something from one to the other, so low end would be 550, upper end would be 1600, something like that, and then each one can only do maybe 5 to 600, and maybe 7 to 800, 9 to 1000, whatever. So you can only really, you can't, use one tuner, one coil can't tune the entire band, obviously. Each coil can only tune one small segment of the band. Probably makes it a little easier to get accurate results if the bandwidth this has to deal with is very, very small. The mechanism, pretty simple. Each button is spring-loaded, pushes this bar across. The bar itself also has a spring in the back to lock it into the notch in each one of these push-button bars. My problem with this setup is the electrical contacts. The coils themselves appear to get grounded to the chassis. I haven't looked at the schematic to see exactly what they're doing, because there's 2 wires going to each, and I'm wondering if the primary... Do these have a primary and a secondary? I'm assuming they should. There's a lot of tiny little wires around here, and I haven't gone poking around in here, but if we're grounding these 2 contacts for each coil, these brass wipers right here are just riveted to the frame. The frame is grounded to the chassis. And there's also a more permanent ground here. Is that a permanent ground? It does... somewhat, yeah, there is a little bit of a permanent ground there. Either way. So that's what they're doing here. My issue is the contacts themselves are basically just 2 little brads, and it's hard to see. These 2 guys come through here with rivets. The face of the rivet is a flat, polished dome head, should be polished. And when you push this in place, it just shoves this brass stamped wiper up against the 2 contacts and shorts them out to ground. I'm sure when this was brand new, these worked just fine, but after decades of sitting, these are sufficiently oxidized, and if there's any lubricant in here, it just turned to sludge. So I've been going through with alcohol and Q-tips and what have you, and I took all the springs off and cleaned underneath them so that I get fairly decent action on these. And I also cleaned the top surface of these strips with alcohol to remove any additional dust, because this is pressing against these creates friction, and they go a little easier if there's not a bunch of junk on there to slow them down. However, one of these, this guy down here, was already bent when I got into it, and it is bent so far back that when you compress it, it is a hair's width away from its respective contacts. And in fact, the phenolic or wafer that this is mounted to has bowed outward and away from the contacts. So this one is dealing with that, so that's not close enough to reach it. These 2 work, just barely. I tried cleaning the contacts until I could get as close to 0 ohm, 0 ohms, as little resistance as possible from between the 2 contacts, to make sure they were actually being bridged sufficiently. And I got pretty close on most of them. This one's just a goner. The brass is bent so badly, and I've tried bending it back into shape gently. I would probably have to anneal it, and I just don't want to take any of this apart. Well, wait a minute. That might work. It looks a little cheesy, actually. Let me break out the meter here and see if that did anything helpful. I doubt it. I highly doubt it. The expectation is most folks that are going to be playing with this set are going to be using the regular manual tuning. I just want all the features. Oh, look at that. Okay, so we've got about less than an ohm of electrical resistance on it. If I wiggle it, it does get a bit worse. So I'm sure that'll be great for stability. But yeah, this method of switch just seems very, very flimsy and prone to failure. So I wiggle this around good enough, it finds a spot that's oxidized more than another, and I have tried my damnedest to get these clean. Used an eraser head to really get as much of the oxidation off. No abrasives, absolutely no abrasives on there. And went back with alcohol to clean off any residue. All these guys up here work great. These guys down here, not so fantastic. But it's more of a gimmick than anything at this point. While I was up here replacing the capacitor and the tone control, I also went in and cleaned the wipers that were accessible. Put a little bit of deoxit on the ones that I couldn't get to. And now I'm going to cap these back off with these, which hook in to the back there. And just drop in like this. So yeah, I'm sure this was a cost-saving measure to use parts like this. But if I was going to build something like this, I would prefer a more robust electrical solution. I've seen other push-button assemblies, and I think a stronger solution is more of a slide switch. Rather than having two contacts pressing together, just having a slide switch where you push in the contact and it simply moves a blade over the pair of contacts like that would probably be a slightly more robust mechanical solution. But that's just me. And again, I don't really have... do any of those up there have electric push-button tuning? My Firestone Air Chief 7427-8 has that type of push-button tuning. I have not been in there in a while, but I do know the last time I plugged it in and tried it, the push-buttons did seem to function, and I kind of got a little reception, but they've never been tuned. In fact, that set needs a dial string, because it was missing its dial string, I couldn't find a stringing diagram, and I didn't have string. So I wasn't able to completely finish putting it back together. I still need to do that. So many things, so little time. Okay, so that looks pretty good. That feels a little loose. Looks like one of those screws isn't as tight as I thought it was. Where did I put that? There's... Yeah, this whole shebang is held down with two self-tapping 1/4-inch head sheet metal screws. Alright, that's better. Alright, so that's solidly in there. Give me a second, and I'm going to flip this over, and we will take a look at what I did underneath. Alright, so quick tour of the work done. All of the paper and electrolytics have been replaced. And we can see at the bottom here, I've got our new inline fuse installed. I went with that because I didn't have any of the glass fuse screw mount holders. So this was available, and it's all nicely insulated, no exposed connections. So that was pretty decent. My last, I believe this was a 12-foot power cord. I like using longer power cords on consoles because you never know where you're going to have an outlet in the house, and maybe the spot you pick is not anywhere close to where one is, depending on when your house was built. Some places just don't have a lot of outlets, like mine. They're kind of sparse. Let's see, got that dealt with. I have replaced just about every single resistor in this thing, except for this guy here, this dog bone here, and that dog bone there. Every single resistor I tested was out of tolerance by more than 20%. And in fact, I did notice at least one, I can't remember exactly where it was. The schematic listed it as a 33 kilo ohm. The part itself had a color code for 47,000, and the resistor itself was currently measuring 67,000. So I dumped that, and I looked at the schematic, I believe it was in the B+ circuit somewhere, and I concluded that if Zenith himself put in on 47K, it was probably a partial revision somewhere along the line. Someone figured, well, we probably obviously ought to put in the next value up resistor for some reason, so I put a 47K in there. I did encounter another 47 kilo ohm resistor down here on the 6A8. That is actually R1 in the circuit, and that is the correct value, but it too had drifted to 64,500 ohms, so swapped that out. Everything else is good to go. There is an interesting little voltage divider circuit up here. Is this on the 6F6? I believe it is. Yeah, so we've got this arrangement here, and for reference, my little curly Q job is not quite as pretty as what Zenith themselves did with the two resistors and the cap there, so this was installed roughly in the same position. There were two electrolytics in here, one of which was down below the flywheel. The rectifier tube is this socket here. Is that the rectifier tube or is that the speaker socket? Okay. Sorry. Speaker socket here, 6F6 here, 5Y4G there. So the electrolytic was a dry type, this fella. So I got rid of that. Obviously, probably installed the 50s along with most of these solar sealed tight caps. Got rid of all those. Surprisingly, all the sealed tights were correct to the schematic values, not just some close enough thing dropped in there. One thing I did take offense to is using a capacitor sufficiently below the original value. So this thing's got two caps. It's got a 16 microfarad coming off the rectifier and a 20 microfarad coming off the other side of the field coil. That's pretty typical, the lower ones next to the rectifier, so it doesn't suck a lot of current and burn the thing up. But the 20 microfarad had been replaced with this, which is only rated at 10. That's just insufficient filtering, so that was a crap job. Unfortunately, I don't have any 16 microfarad caps. I used them all up, so I'm using a pair of 22s. 22 up here, 22 up there. That might seem a little crazy, but 16 microfarad, if we were to go up, say, 50% tolerance, which is not certainly possible for caps of that age when they were made, that's about 22 microfarads, or actually 24 microfarads would be 50% out of tolerance on the high end of things. So that should be fine. That didn't go too crazy with it. And yeah, outside of that, everything else was pretty easy to deal with. This has had a replacement volume control installed. That seems to be the only major thing that was changed. I'm glad they left the original electrolytics in place. They didn't unscrew them, they just disconnected them, so that was nice. Was able to keep those up top for appearance's sake. And yeah, at this point, I need to grab the speaker. I need to repair the electrical connections on the speaker because the wiring was spliced because it had a replacement audio output transformer, but none of the connections were soldered. They're just twisted together, and they just put cambric tubing over them. They did not use electrical tape or anything that would actually hold in place, so of course they just all kind of fell off. So I'm going to flip this back over, fix the speaker real quick, but I need to get this thing, all the tubes back in it, powered up, and we got to see what it needs for an alignment. Okay, we're ready to rock and roll. The alignment went pretty easily once I realized I was hooking into the 6K7 instead of the 6A8, as per the alignment procedure. Went a lot more smoothly once I did it per the instructions. And yeah, that worked out pretty well. Tracking, only had to tweak it a little bit with the crystal liner. Got it locked in pretty good at 1500 and 1000 kilocycles. Verified all that was correct throughout the range. And believe it or not, I got most, if not all, of the automatic tuning presets to work. In fact, these three over here were already tuned into a station. So whatever, I didn't have the labels on the old call letter holders. They were all empty, so presumably they were for local stations. Apparently those frequencies are still in use. So I tweaked these once the whole thing had warmed up for a good period of time. You generally don't want to set these until it's had like 15-20 minutes to actually get everything up to temperature and stabilize, and then you can tweak those settings. Like I thought, these ones over here are a little iffy. But they do work. I can't remember if I managed to get stations on all of them. I'm actually going to do a little separate video, I think, once I have it back in the cabinet about how to set the presets up, because I went through my writer's book and I actually found the page that deals with the automatic tuning range, and it doesn't actually list the method. It's mostly just turn it on, let it warm up, push the button, and then adjust the screw thing. Very, very simple. But it lists the specific tuning ranges of each of these slugs, which is very important because you want to know, okay, where's the lower end of the band, where's the higher end of the band, blah, blah, blah. Apparently in this case, low end 500 is over here, high end 1600 is over here, and it increases across. And they only have a bandwidth of about, what's it looking like, 400... 300 to 400-ish kilocycles. It varies a little bit. So not a lot, but they give you a few of each, so you have a good selection to work with. So I've tweaked them to work with stations that are local to me. That remains to be seen whether or not that'll work for once we're set up in August. But while we're there, I'll turn it on, fire it up, and if I have to adjust it for some local stations, so be it. There's one actually I'm hoping to get AM 880. If I can get that to work strong up there, it'd be nice to make that a preset. I can barely get it here. But enough talk. Let me turn the lights off and get this fired up. I am getting a little bit of popping and crackling. I'm not sure if I've got dust or something in the tuning condenser. I'll probably blow that out again. But it seems to exist mostly at the high end of the dial, so I have a suspicion that it might be junk in the tuning plates. I tried to blow everything out. Anyway. That dial is just great looking. I put brand new number 44 bulbs in it. We're on... There we go.
De Oliveira entered no plea and is out on bond until
this thing's got a lot of volume. It can sound nice when it gets in the cabinet.
De Oliveira with Trump and co-defendant Walton.
Don't care. What I want's right about here. Yes, that's the oldies station we've got here. Really, really weak though. I don't have a long antenna.
Potentially infectious agents in...
Really, really powerful Hispanic station here. That one will absolutely blow your ears off. But yeah, a lot of popping and crackling through here. I'm not sure if that's... Not sure if that's in the tuning condenser or not. I'm hoping it's none of the micas. I can replace those later if need be. But once we get down here, it tends to go away.
Your best option to be cool is to reject the standards of coolness of the liberal culture.
Crash recently. 2-1. He's facing 8, 9, and 1 of the order.
Oh yeah, and we have tone control, kind of. This is normal.
The 2-1. Swinging it fouled off the right side. Another fastball.
That's voice, gives us a lot more treble.
2-2.
High fidelity.
Reyes base hit his last time up, a single. Irby going 5. Spire is scoreless 6. Now Brash in the 7th. All time.
Bass is... Well, that's just bass.
Slider up above the zone. It's a full count. We're broadcasting from the Western Washington Toyota radio booth here at T-Mobile Park, beginning the top of the 7th inning.
And foreign, I don't know what foreign is supposed to do. It doesn't sound much different than bass. To me, anyway.
Racing over, and he's able to get there, keeping his feet and making the catch. My goodness, did Julio just cover a ton of ground right there. He made that look awfully easy.
It seems like the base setting, but slightly less. I'm not sure what they were trying to say.
My goodness, a great first step. Great run to make a nice catch.
That station comes in really nice and clean. And there's not much at the lower end of the dial around here.
For everything firearm, ammo to accessories. As we start the new year, Wade's reloaded on everything you need to make the most of your Second Amendment rights. Wade's offers 20 ammo and accessories.
Okay, now, I haven't played with the police and foreign band. There's mostly just bleeps and bloops. Maybe if I had a really long antenna, that might work. Yeah, there's not a whole lot there. However, now let's go over to the automatic band. Alright, so right now I have nothing engaged. Let's start over on the low end.
Stop by soon and tell Millar's sent you. 570 KVI, the summer of fun continues. Sponsored by Seattle Hot Tub. This week, explore the land of enchantment.
Give me the toy quickly out to Crawford. JP's got it.
Jim Irsay not being shy in how he feels about it.
Yeah, the left side, it's pretty crappy.
Healthy blood pressure. Work between 90 to Main Tiger Mountain Road and Tacoma to Olympia, 27 minutes on I-5 South. Our next stop is traffic at 834.
The News Radio 1000 FM 96. Como estaba mareado, cayó hacia atrás y su cabeza se golpeó contra la acera.
With highs in the mid-80s and no rain in the forecast. I'm Kelly Blyer, and that's a check of your Northwest News. Simplysafe.com/radio. Advanced home security, 24/7 professional monitoring. $1 a day. There's no safe like Simply Safe. Did you know you can get your prescriptions for less at your local pharmacy? You can with GoodRx.
The warning track, he's at the wall with space.
Okay, for a cheap push-button system, it does work. It seems to work repeatably. I haven't played it long enough to see if there's any drift once this whole thing gets warm. And plus, once this is in the cabinet, this whole coil assembly is going to be subjected to all the heat coming off the tubes, and I'm curious to see how much they do move around, as opposed to putting them somewhere else. I think on the later ones that had the radio organ tone control, the push-button tuning and everything would wind up out on the edges, a little further away from all the more appropriate dedicated system. So that might work a little better, be more stable than this.
Fly.
BECU.
But either way, this thing plays great. I'm happy with it. I got a lot of electronics in here, so I'm sure that's not helping with the static. I'll give it one more blow through with the air compressor to try and get the junk out of the tuning condenser there. But yeah, I've only got a few feet of antenna. Hope to have a little more, and I don't have a ground. There is no solid ground attached to this, so I'm getting this just with the single wire aerial. And yeah, I'm really happy with it. This looks fantastic, and it's gonna look a lot better too once it's back in the cabinet. And I think in the next video I will actually show off the cabinet. We'll get this loaded back in there, see how it looks. And then I'll have to take it all apart again because transporting it to the event, it's pretty awkward getting this thing in and out of my house assembled. Cabinet's going to have to go separately. Chassis is going to go separately for safety. And yeah, it's a snap to put it together. But that's all I've got for this week. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.